Okay then, gents, let's switch gears and focus on up and down the Premier League table. Let's preview all the games and make our picks for week 4 of the campaign, just ahead of the international break. Let's get into it. Nick Mendola, we previewed Arsenal Man United a lot on PST this week. What do you think about the Gunners and the Red Devils squaring off here? Because it seems like they're both in strange places. But give me your score prediction for that big one in North London.
Yeah, I think it's a goal or maybe 2 goals for Arsenal, but it's going to be a close game. I just think they're due for one of those, hey, remember who we are games. Remember what we did all of last season. The flip side of that, though, is, Joe, not to hedge too much, but I look at Bruno Fernandes, who he's been missing that finishing edge, but has done a lot of really pretty things. He had a couple almost moments with some delicious passes and some just missed. That header against Tottenham as well. Yep. So I look at Fernandes and Rashford and think maybe they're due for a day where they, kind of have that moment that carries their team to a point. And that's why I think this game is going to be close, but ultimately United is just giving up too many chances against a team that already makes a lot of chances.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Going to be a good one, but I can see that happening as well. Arsenal just nicking it at home, but should be a lot of great play of all those talented attackers in full flow there. But defensively for both teams, got to improve a little bit, especially on the last weekend's performance. Andy, I don't think Man City have to improve that much. I mean, they've been really good so far. Workmanlike, I think, is the best way to describe it. Just grinding out the wins, even without Kevin De Bruyne. They host Fulham. I mean, Fulham, can they do it again? They drew away at Arsenal last week in a bit of a surprise, but I don't know. This seems like a City win, maybe 3 or 4-0 written all over it.
Can Fulham do it again? I'm going to go with no, Joe. Something in me just says that this Manchester City team, they got enough talent to hold off plucky little Fulham from the cottage. I think, that's the plugging along, starting very slow, building up early. This is just what Pep Guardiola teams do. They never come out of the gates quickly. They never show you everything right away early in the season. They're never at their best in August or September or October. And then sometime around the holidays, the turn of the new year, he figures out what the 11 and the 14 and the 18 are, what's going to be the rotation for the rest of the season, plots everything out, it seems like, and it goes almost always exactly according to plan. So they'll just continue to kind of click through whatever gears that they need to. They reminded me of a house cat last weekend against Sheffield United. A cat will catch a mouse, but it never kills it immediately. It'll play with it before it does whatever it inevitably does with it. They were just kind of batting Sheffield United around. They're a goal up. Oh, hey, you equalize. We'll score again 3 minutes later. We win. That's what it seems so easy for Manchester City, and I expect the same this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But full America, you never know. They're scrapping away right now. So maybe they can make it a bit more interesting than we think it's going to be. Focusing on the teams in Europe, we call this one at PST the Nick Mendola Derby. His team Newcastle against a team he really loves and I think deep down maybe wishes he would have chosen to support many years ago, Brighton. Nick, the smile on your face says it all. 2 great teams who've been superb last season on an upward trajectory. What are you expecting at the Amex from these 2?
Goals. I think this is going to be a big weekend for goals. Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool, Villa, what we're talking about. But Brighton and Newcastle, you have 2 teams that like to play wide open, that are a lot of fun to watch, that have players trying to prove a point. I mean, I look at Newcastle, and Callum Wilson has been coming off the bench. Does he get a chance? If he doesn't, is Alexander Isak going to, stake his claim? I look over at Brighton, the rumors of some of the players that they may get in. They are so much fun to watch. It reminds me a little bit of Willem Dafoe was the movie. I think it might be Boondock Saints. He just screams, "It was a firefight!" Like that's what I think this is just going to be, back and forth and shots from all areas and combination play. A big test, probably more for Eddie Howe after 2 rough weeks. We expected it against Man City. He disappointed against Liverpool, and I think this has 4 or 5 goals written all over it combined.
Andy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Andy, we talked a lot about Liverpool Villa on the show this week as well. What are you expecting between those 2 teams that are hoping to get into the top 4 of the Premier League?
Yeah, a lot of scoring chances. Liverpool really, really kind of right now without balance in the midfield. They have kind of decided that we're going to defend half or 2/3 of the field with 3 players, and we're going to push everybody else forward and try to defend from the front and control the game, keep it in the other team's half of the field and final third, press them as much as they can to take the pressure off the back line. But as we've seen around the Premier League now, there is quality, and there's almost enough quality in every team in the league to either find a way to play through and or around that, or some teams, and West Ham, though they haven't played Liverpool directly yet this season, they've shown, well, just go direct, right? Straight up top, over through the middle. And so teams are starting to figure out, I think, that there's going to be a lot of space in behind the Liverpool defense. We'll see how Klopp navigates that without Virgil van Dijk in this one. I actually like Aston Villa to not just get something, I think they'll win. If it was at Villa Park, I would say I know they will win. But because it's at Anfield, I say I think they'll win 2-1.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one at Anfield. But you're right. Both these teams very dangerous going forward. The only question marks I have is going the other way. So let's wait and see how it goes this weekend. Burnley against Spurs. I'm big on Ange Ball. I am all in on Postecoglou at Tottenham. I think it's been brilliant what he's done so far to change the mood and just the tactics is the same wherever he's been in Japan or at Celtic and now at Spurs. Clear identity, clear philosophy. James Maddison's been superb. I like what Burnley are doing as well, but I still think they're trying to find their way under Vincent Kompany this season. It's totally different in the Championship. They cannot play the same way they did last season, so they're having to rebuild themselves, really. I think it's going to take time for Burnley. So see nothing other than a 2-0 win for Spurs, let's say that. I think they dominate, create a lot of chances. And for Spurs, the only issue I have is without Richarlison up top. I mean, he's trying his best. He's trying to work in the channels, but he's not a clinical finisher. Who else is going to play in that role potentially for Spurs? We'll have to wait and see. But the only issue I have is, are they going to put away enough of the chances they create on a consistent basis to stay at the top end of the table? But midfield, everywhere else, they look really good. So I'm going to go for a Spurs win at Burnley. Nick, Chelsea against Nottingham Forest. This is a really fun one on paper, right?
Yeah, listen, I'll be honest with you. I think Chelsea's going to win this game, but I just kind of want to have a word with you guys about Forest. I think Steve Cooper is, again, we've seen fewer transfers, although they're still being linked with a lot of moves late in the window. I think he's kind of figured out what he wants to do. And while I don't expect this team to contend for the top half of the table, I think they may establish themselves as a well-organized team playing a plan. And there are some difference makers on this team. I think I talked about Morgan Gibbs-White a lot last year. So while I'm predicting Chelsea to win, I think it should be one of those 2-0, 3-1 style games. If you were to tell me that we walk out of this weekend with Forest coming away with something, especially early in a Pochettino project, I wouldn't be that surprised. I think Forest has something to it this year.
You know what they remind me of? Like Palace about 7 years ago. Just really good on the counter. They hang in games and they can cause some shocks. And at home, at the City ground as well. They're really good. But I think Nicholas Jackson, Raheem Sterling for Chelsea, Enzo Fernandez, they just kind of figured out the balance at the top end of the pitch. And yeah, there's not a lot of options, right, to rotate it around, but I think they'll be fine. And Brentford against Bournemouth. Andy, what are you expecting from that one? Because I think Brentford, they're doing fine without Ivan Toney. Their 3 forwards have stepped up and scored their goals so far, and they're just being Brentford. But Bournemouth, I said at the start of the season, a bit worried about them this campaign.
Yeah, Brentford almost become so easy to talk about that it's hard to talk about them because it's the same thing year after year. They turn the squad over, players get sold to somebody, the best player maybe that they've had during this entire run gets suspended for half of a season. Okay, well, we've got someone to drop into that place. We'll make a small tactical change. They're a little bit slower in build-up because they don't have the big target man to start the counterattacks and to use to kind of as the outlet ball. And so now Brian Mbeumo and Yohan Wissa and even Kevin Schad, who got his first goal for Spurs over the weekend, they've shown that they can continue to just kind of pull the weight and distribute the goal-scoring load for however long they need to. And I think everybody at this point should just assume that Brentford will be fine, and they will continue to plug along. Bournemouth were pretty disappointing in that game against Tottenham. You would expect, even as good as Spurs have been early in the season, that with as much changeover as there's been there, that at some point in the game you would get at them just a little bit and cause them a little bit of threat, and they just never really did in that game. They're better defensively than they've been in the past, but this one has Brentford written all over it to me. They'll just outwork anybody 2-0.
Fair enough. And focused on the relegation scrappers, we're already kind of seeing a group down there at the bottom. Luton, They host West Ham United, their first home game as a Premier League club, Luton Town, Kenilworth Road. It's undergone a big redevelopment in the summer to get themselves ready after that unexpected promotion. So that's going to be quite the sight to see them hosting that at that tiny little stadium. We've all seen the photos of how you enter some of the stands through someone's front garden, basically in the front of their house. And it's pretty epic to see them on this stage. But I do think West Ham are ruthless right now. This will be a dangerous game for West Ham. I think David Moyes will have them prepared for that. But the way that they're rotating and the options they have now in midfield as well, with Alvarez and Ward-Prowse coming in, and Mohamed Kudus joining, I think they've spent the Declan Rice money extremely well on 3 top quality players. And it's kind of a clinic. And okay, you lose your best player, but replace him with 3 players who can, paper over the cracks, but also make you better as well. So whoever's doing the transfer business there at West Ham, hats off to them. But again, just figuring it out, as I said, not quite sure what they want to be yet with so many new additions and kind of taking the next step. So I think West Ham will win, but it'll be close. And Nick, Sheffield United against Everton. That is a 6-pointer, right? A relegation scrap. Is it too early to call it a relegation 6-pointer? We're in the 4th week of the season, for goodness sake.
Oh, man, you would hate to be the team that walks away this with a loss, or both teams walking away from this with a draw. I think it has to go for Everton. It has. I'm not saying I'm picking them to win.
You think they're going to score their first goal of the season?
Yeah, this has to be a performance out of Sean Dyche's men. And I know that they might have got some midweek vibes with Beto coming off the bench and scoring in cup action. But Sheffield United, if they were to go 0-4, you'd be disappointed, but you'd also say, wow, this is kind of what we expected. We've got to find some wins along the way. Everton, this is not what they expected. And it's been, honestly, a schedule where you would have expected them to get some points. So one other side note for midweek action is Austin Trusty started for Sheffield United and played really well for an 0-3 team. So hopefully we can see another American in the Premier League, maybe even this weekend.
USA. Let's do it. All right, talking about the Eagles, Crystal Palace, American little segue there. Hope you guys like that. Crystal Palace against Wolves. I think we said this about Palace Brentford last weekend, Andy. This has got a draw written all over it. It kind of feels like Wolves are scrappy, will sit in there, create chances on the counter, and then Palace will kind of do the same thing.
Yep, great minds think alike, Joe. I wrote something pretty similar in the power rankings as well this week. Palace are going to be difficult to be beaten this season, but they're not going to score a ton, so they're not going to beat a lot of teams either. They're very much in a transitional period right now, especially with Roy Hodgson still being the coach. They're in safe hands with him, but they're probably not in the hands that are going to take them forward long term while they figure some things out there in South London. But they're a difficult defensive team to break down. They've got a couple of good center backs. They've got strong defensive fullbacks. They're not going to get forward a ton. They don't have a lot of width in attack, and so they're fairly predictable when they go forward. Still waiting for Michael Elise to come back, and that's the X factor for this team. Once he comes back, how good can he be? Can he take that next step up and be a player that Manchester City and Chelsea wanted to sign just a couple of weeks ago? But for this weekend, I kind of like Wolves a little bit. They're a little bit more dangerous on the counter right now. They're solid defensively as well, and so I'll go in a game that won't have a lot of scoring chances. And Joe, I've got my fingers crossed I don't draw this one on the weekend for the recap. For that reason, but I'm going to go 1-0 to Wolves.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And for even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock. And be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend on USA Network and on Peacock. We will see you there.